If the Nuggets lose Kentavious Caldwell-Pope in free agency, then what? The Nuggets have prided themselves on continuity, but what if the Nuggets are forced to make changes? And more than that, should they embrace change to the core roster? We'll talk about that. Plus, Gordon Hayward, ? NBA free agencies hot and heavy on Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us, making us your first listen. Appreciate you guys being with us here on a Sunday night with world's finest here on youtube.com/Locked On Nuggets, where you can always join the show. Or if you're joining us on the podcast version on Monday, glad to have you guys on board. We are here for you Monday through Friday, even through the offseason. We'll have lots of shows this week talking about various topics. I heard a bunch of stuff over the weekend. Can I interest you in some Clint Capella rumors out of Mahrez? I have some juicier ones than that we can talk about on maybe Wednesday's show.
Are you talking about, just around the association?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, not for Denver. No.
I was like, what?
No. That would be funny though. However, I will say this is just a random aside. I think we're going to see a lot of center shuffling, so there might be an opportunity to snag a good one on the cheap because there might be a musical chair situation. But on today's show, we're going to talk about what happens if the Nuggets lose Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. We're also going to get into continuity. How important is that, especially if the core five is disrupted? Then what does that mean for Denver? Plus, I want to talk to Adam a little bit about what changes probably need to happen with maybe the deeper parts of the roster. How much changeover should the Nuggets kind of look for this offseason? Given how close they were to a Western Conference Finals and, in my opinion, Finals appearance. Plus, there's news about Gordon Hayward coming out of DNVR, a little shop you might have heard of. So we're going to talk about that report as well. Glad to have you guys with us. Want to let you know that today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Adam, welcome back, buddy. I want to ask you, so I've been asking, but like I said, I've been hearing stuff around the league, and I had two different people that are pretty plugged in. When I asked about Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, I heard two different things. One, the offer ranges go from like the mid-level exception to like significant offers beyond the mid-level exception into serious money from organizations that are looking to kind of cement themselves. They want to change the culture for the serious, is what I was told. Is that there are certain teams that feel like KCP is the kind of veteran that they want for these squads, and they're willing to pay a premium price for him, as well as all the contenders obviously being willing to try and fit him into whatever exceptions that they can. The other thing I heard, and I heard this as well, is that Kentavious Caldwell-Pope's representation has at least indicated to people around the league that the number of teams interested is high, to the point where I was like, I kind of bounced this off some Nuggets folks and was like, this isn't the case, right? Like, this isn't, like, that's not true. And they're like, no, that we don't know for that for sure, but it sounds right to us. And the number was like 20 out of 30 teams at least having called to be like, hey, we'd like to at least have some conversation about KCP. And I was like, that can't, sure, Jan. And then like some Nuggets folks were actually like, no, that's how good he is. That's not surprising. So I think that's an interesting thing to kind of keep an eye on. With that said, I think like here's a starter question. First off, I just want to ask you this right now, and like I'm not asking you to make like an informed. I don't think that you're texting with KCP and he's like, here's what I'm gonna do. But do you think the Nuggets retain Kentavious Caldwell-Pope this summer?
If I had to place a bet on one side or the other, my bet would be on no.
Yeah. That's right.
And I think it's going to be in large part because of the difficulty of Denver, probably trying to avoid that second apron and not being able to do so, should you retain him. And it's scary, to be honest with you. I know that's what we're about to get into, but that's a very scary thought to me.
I'm with you. I'm also of the opinion, I'm of the opinion right now where like I would, on my board of various things I'm expecting, I've penciled in that Kentavious Caldwell-Pope will not be with the Nuggets next season, which is honestly a little bit, it's crazy how this stuff just like hits you fast, where I honestly was like, yeah, he's got a player option, but like, no, like the Nuggets core five's got to be together like forever. No, it's like, no, it could be broken up as soon as this summer. I do think that the number one option, unless a player that they are surprised to find comes available for really cheap, or there's a deal that they can't say no to, which I don't know what that looks like, to be quite honest with you, unless something like that were to happen. And like these things can always change, but I do think the most likely scenario is that Christian Braun takes over the starting 2-guard spot, which I've expressed a lot of concern about in the past.
Well, you hate Christian Braun, let's be honest. But I know it, but it's also true. He was very good at the playoffs. But here's the thing. You're right, though, about the difference between KCP and Christian Braun in terms of versatility. We've talked about this a little bit, but I think Christian Braun's defense is phenomenal, albeit different than what KCP's is. They do different things. Like in theory, you want to have both of those two guys. But Christian Braun offensively is nowhere near KCP, and I just don't expect him to be. He would have to like develop a skill set, not improve on his current skill set, but develop a skill set that I think is different from what he is capable of doing right now. And those things just don't tend to happen in 1 year's time. Like if you told me 5 years from now, he was a very good like driver, I'd be like, oh, that's possible. If you told me in 5 months he is, like, I'd be like, come on, man. You kidding me? Like that it finishing at the rim and everything else. So for me, it is scary. I think Christian Braun would be very good. But here's the big thing, and I know it leads into the next topic a little bit, Matt. One thing that bothers me about the discourse about Nikola Jokic in particular is this idea that the Nuggets have built the perfect roster for him. And that if you take any piece away, all of a sudden that roster is no longer perfect. They did have a perfect roster in that they figured out a way to play with those 5 guys. But I think that Jokic's significantly more versatile as a player and making guys good than than like, oh, you only have to give him this perfect specific collection of players. And I think that Denver would find a way to be a different team, but effective with who they placed in there. The question is, the bigger question for me is, you had both KCP and Christian Braun. You take one away, there's no way to say you got better. You had that option already. Now you would lose that option and have to have somebody to replace, what you lost in KCP behind Christian Braun.
A lot of stuff there. I agree with you on the Jokic point where, to be honest with you, I think that Nikola could probably make it work with any number of guys. I think that there are guys that he can make even better, that where it's like, I also think the better way to think of it is there's guys that Jokic can raise the ceiling with, and there's guys that Jokic can raise the floor with. And you were very early on the, him and Fareed actually worked together. And I was like, come on, no. And then it was like, no, like, look at this. Like, look at how they work together when you
great on offense.
When you give him an athletic forward, like, look at what happens. And then AG was this combination of
that with defense,
right? And so like you were very early on that. And if I say, I would bet that they're top, like the starting unit is still top 5 in the NBA next season in net rating. That's not surprising because you could put a series of mops on the floor with Nikola. And at this point, I'm kind of like, yeah, they'll probably be top 5 in net rating.
Let's play that game though. If you told me that was the lineup, I mean, it's hard because we don't know the bench, but let's just say you have the same bench, and that is to say not such a great bench, but your starters are that with Christian Braun. Would you expect that to be a top 5 net rating team?
I would.
I don't know if I would.
Just based off of the fact that I think you can pencil in Murray for at least what he's done, right? Like he had a down year, and you've commented on this, that like his stats were the same. I don't think we can expect a worse year from Jamal.
I think your fear is that you get the same year from Jamal.
Flat, right? So flat.
Yeah.
And so like then the question really kind of becomes like, okay, if you lose KCP shooting, how much of a downgrade is that? And like the athleticism factor probably balances a little bit of that out. Like my reservations about Christian, one, are all on the offensive end, not on the defensive end. He's not as good as getting around screens, but guess what? There's other things that he does.
That's what I mean about them being different. Yeah.
Yeah, they're different. And like you can balance that out. And offensively, maybe more continuity. And look, he did, like, as much as I may have reservations or concerns about it, he did make a significant leap shooting. Like that to me has been expressed as like the primary concern with Christian is he has to be a consistent shooter. Yeah. And I have worries about it, but also like if Christian was 37%, which is league average next season, would that surprise me? No, I think that'd be perfectly fine. And Nikola is such a weapon that I think that they probably, and MPJ, to be honest, no matter what happened in the playoffs, they still have spacing and size and athleticism and can get stops and run. And then they have the best player in basketball. So yeah, I kind of do.
It's possible for sure.
So like one of the concerns though, I think is it gets kind of back to what we were talking about, or one of the things we kind of talked about this season, which I think is really interesting, is just like, we'll talk about this more throughout the offseason, but it is like a real big question for me now of, they were a better team overall this season than they were the year before by the numbers because the defense was better.
Yeah.
But they never felt as explosive or as special because the offense never got to that level.
So true.
And I wonder if maybe that balance needs to get tweaked towards that again. And Christian's more of a move towards the former of really solid.
Well, you know what's funny is we always talked about it's a really good point, and it's a really good it's very fun to think about that. But do you remember Jonathan Tjarks wrote an article 5 years ago about to build a championship team around Jokic, build a great defensive lineup, and trust that he'll carry it offensively. Denver didn't actually end up needing that because they had this interesting two-way lineup and they won a title. But it does make you wonder, like, well, what if they did? What if they were 3 on defense and 10th on offense? Mm-hmm. And then you get to a playoffs and it's like, but can Jokic raise that 10th just a little bit in playoff mode? But defensively, they're the best team in the playoffs because you put all these defenders around, or enough defensive players around them. It's a thought that this is what I mean about, I think Denver right now, we have this vision of what the ideal Nuggets team, Jokic team looks like because we saw this version of him. But I do think there are other versions you can build that would be very different, but equally as great. I'm not convinced the Nuggets are like going to do that by just rotating everybody up one spot. But I do think it's theoretically possible to build a completely different roster and be like, oh yeah, that also works.
On the other side, we'll talk more about this. Plus, do
you agree with that, by the way? Just real quick, the idea? Yeah,
I do. And in large part because I'm just like, I'm very much of the opinion that basketball is, I'm such an analytical guy, but I'm also the opinion that so much of this is ephemeral where, sorry, I've been told I've been using too many verbial.
No, that's a great one.
Like, it shifts too much. Yeah. It's not concrete. It's not like, oh, they're this good, and then you add this guy who scores this many points, so they're that many points better. That's not how it works. And like a lot of it is about like that. It's chemistry, but it's also just like you can have chemistry and the chemistry evolves, because the chemistry I think for the Nuggets this year was not the same as it was last year. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't the same as it was the year before. And so that's how I think you can kind of find it. If the Nuggets find that way to play, then yeah, I think they can be as good or better. On the other side, we'll talk more about continuity. I want to ask some questions about some of the guys deeper on the roster as well. Plus, I'll explain a little bit more of why it is that I don't think KCP is going to be back. We'll talk about that up next on Locked On Nuggets. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. I have a buddy who he works in lumber, and he's trying to like hire an office manager. And he was actually like telling me, he's like, I'm stressing out about it because it's a pretty like small lumber yard in the sticks. And so I was like, I'm serious. You should use LinkedIn Jobs. And I was like, I'm not kidding. And he's like, are they a sponsor? And I was like, yes, they are, but still you should use them. And he actually had like a really quality experience with them because of what they're able to do for these small businesses. It's not just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals that you can find anywhere else. You can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire, so they cut through that with making the processes easier. They just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us here on a Sunday for World's Finest, or if you're listening to us on a Monday. Appreciate you guys joining us. Hope your week's off to a great start. God, the weather's amazing in Colorado right now. I'm just like drinking in how amazing it is in this state in the month of May and June. It is the absolute best. So we're talking about kind of some of the ramifications. I do want to get a little bit more into, because Hurricanes in the comment section talking about this is ridiculous, just keep him. So this is the problem, is it's actually not about the money. It's really not. And I say that as somebody who has very often criticized the Cronkies for their willingness to spend in various areas of the organization. That's got nothing to do with this.
It's ironic that right when it was time for them to prove that they were willing to spend, spending became a thing that was tied to other things to handicap them. Trade restrictions and everything else.
Yeah, it's a shame that the owners decided to make that decision in the latest CBA.
That's true. That's a great point.
That decision, man, it's a shame that the owners, Josh Kroenke and Stan Kroenke, got hit with that decision from the owners.
You know what? I will say this, though. I actually think they would have preferred, like, who knows what they really believe. But I bet you if they had a choice to go back to the old rules, they would.
They would.
Just because they did build a team that was perfect for the last rules.
It's not like a guarantee, but I will tell you that from my conversations and my read on it, I will tell you that I am very, 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 very strongly convinced that if this was the old CBA, you would already have the Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is expected to remain in Denver on an X years for X money deal.
Yeah.
That would already be done. But the problem is, if they go into that second apron, you lose so much flexibility. And I just talked about how basketball is ephemeral. What if things are not good next year and you're just like, man, we're spiraling, we got to do something.
Right.
You can't aggregate money in trades.
Right.
It limits your ability to do about 100 things once you reach the second apron.
Your roster is your roster.
Your roster is your roster. And you can't sign guys off the buyout pile either. So you're just there. And if you have a bad spate of injuries, that gets dire very, very quickly. You have no room to maneuver.
I will say, though, there is a part of me that goes, if you brought back KCP and you made one good move this offseason to just add, for me, probably a backup point guard would be my piece. But if you made like one rotational piece, would you need something else? I know there's injuries and everything else, but at a certain point, we play that game and go, if you get injuries, you're not going to win it anyway.
Yeah.
Part of me goes, that's a good enough team. We already know it. You needed depth. Hopefully one more year of Christian and Peyton means that you have that next year. Maybe it's all you need. I don't know.
I think it also gets into the repeater. I think it also gets into the matter of when you're like, because they have Murray and then Gordon, if you put KCP on that kind of a money deal, that impacts your ability. Because if you find yourself in a bad spot, you might just lose one of the other guys and not have a way to replace them. And I think one of the things that's important is for them, if they can't find a deal with Gordon, or if something happens, God forbid, or if something happens with Murray, God forbid, and they just can't find a deal. And I'm talking about like as much as it could be as simple as, hey, I just want a change of scenery. I just don't, I want to try something new in my career, whatever that is. You want to be able to replace them. If they've got KCP on that kind of a deal next to Yoke, automatically you're up against it in terms of trying to find those replacement options.
Yeah.
And so that gets tough. That's when you start finding yourself in kind of bad situations. One of the things I wanted to ask you was, I'm good with the 7, or I guess now it's 6 if we just remove KCP. Put Christian in KCP spot plus Peyton. How many of the other guys do you think it is good for them to retain?
So this is the tough question that I think you get at. This is why this year is so interesting and why this offseason is so compelling, is how much, trust and vibe was lost this year with how it ended. Because I think that this was a very tiring year for a lot of people in the Nuggets organization, a lot of players, the accumulation of all of the wear and tear, but also just the emotional toll, I think, of the season. And let's be honest, it went south and they lose. And I think there's a little bit of looking around and going like, is everybody here, or, is this what we need to keep doing, is riding with this team? So my answer to that is, I think continuity is probably less important going into next year than it has been for the previous several. I think it's less. It doesn't mean it's not important, but I definitely look at it and go, I think that especially if you lose KCP, you're probably going to have a new identity anyway. And there is some value to, all right, just get started on that, see what you can do. The problem is, Matt, the pieces you talk about with continuity, I don't think you trade Aaron Gordon. He's still a useful player. He's very good. It's not Jamal Murray. As much as he drives me nuts, I don't think you're moving on from him. Michael Porter's the only guy you could look at, and I don't think there's a trade where you get good value for Michael Porter. If there is one out there, I would 100% be for it. And not because I'm low on Michael Porter. As much as anything, it would be because I think the formula in the new CBA, 3 max contracts, I think it'd be very hard to win with 3 max contracts on your roster going forward. I just think that's an old formula. You probably have 2, and then you have depth pieces.
I agree. And more of my questions are honestly about, do you like, I think Reggie probably needs to be moved on from as much as
he's a different type of he almost doesn't count as continuity to me. He really only played 1 year.
Right. And so if we're talking about continuity, we really are talking about the starters. So I'm really talking more about like
and I would include Christian now. Christian's 2 years in at least. So
yeah, I mean, I would throw Peyton in that too. I think P. Watt's like part of the team now.
Yeah.
But this is part of the thing though, is I've talked about this a little bit. Colin Gillespie got the edge because of, I believe, because of he was with the team when they won the title, and he was there the whole year, and he was working out, and he was with the guys, and he was like one of them, and they trusted and they believed in him because he was one of their guys. And it was like there needed to be like a basketball decision of like, hey, this guy is like clearly not playoff viable, doesn't need to get minutes, right? And so that's like an example of a player where I'm like, because I do think this is one of the things that gets kind of lost. I don't personally feel, and you can disagree if you do, I don't feel like the locker room is like because I've covered teams like that where like there's 2 locker rooms. Like the Nuggets honestly had that when it was like the veterans and then the kids. That's not how it's felt like to me. It felt like there's just like one team. And so even if these guys are small players, like they're part of the chemistry vibe that we talk about. And so even when we get to players like DeAndre Jordan, or we get to players like Zeke Naji, or we get to players like just down the list, and if we're talking about how to keep costs down, obviously I think turning a higher role over to Jalen Pickett and Strother is probably going to be necessary. And then you get into the question of, okay, but if you're going to do that, you probably also need like a backup plan, right? And to do that, they got to clear roster spaces. So like that's part of the question to me is if you move Jalen Pickett and Julian Strother into 7 and 8 in the rotation, you need an option at 9 and 10 that are like, no, if things go sideways, those guys can play.
And honestly, this is why, for me, that was supposed to be this year because you had that setup.
Yeah.
Next year, and somebody asked there's Adam out on Pickett. I'm kind of out on the timeline now. This was the year. To me, there was like a very narrow window to thread of you need to buy him minutes, and if it doesn't work out, you have Reggie. And if you get to a playoffs, you have a Reggie to go to. You have somebody to go to. But next year, I don't think you can do that thing. You can't like reset the clock. And that's why it's still possible. And I like Pickett and I think that he has a chance, but how much are you really going to commit to him now that we're in year 2? I don't see a realistic scenario where he's going to get the requisite amount of trust, minutes, time, and everything else to develop confidence, and then also be ready by the end of next year because you don't want to waste 2 years now and do it. To me, that it was already a narrow, you had a narrow window there. And now it's like 10 times more narrow.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point.
And on top of that, you're talking about Strother, Peyton Watson, and Jalen. That's 3. Like, I'm all for young guys are succeeding in the modern NBA. But for most teams, it's 1.5. It's like
right.
1 and then 1 other guy. When you say you need all 3, like it's good to have all 3, but to need all 3, that's where it's like, I don't know. That's why this year to me was so important.
Terrence says if KCP goes, let go of Reggie and Zeke and give $23 million to Patrick Williams. I'm telling you, Patrick Williams is the one. 40% from 3, tenacious defense, physical, 6'7", length increases, 21 years old.
They're not.
I don't know if you mean that from a per year or over the course of his deal. What I will tell you is that the Nuggets will not be able to outbid other teams for Patrick Williams.
Yeah, I was going to say that seems a lot of these are a little bit too optimistic.
So like but I the only reason I kind of bring it up as a thing is not to kind of clown on Terrence, but instead just to be like, hey, just so you're aware, like I'm already hearing that like the Hornets are going to make they're going to make a huge offer for Patrick Williams if Miles Bridges goes to Philadelphia. Like that's their next guy. And when you're dealing with these teams with all this cap space, the championship experience isn't going to be able to. That's why we kind of get back to this when everyone's like, why don't you go get this guy? And it's like, because they can't afford him.
Right.
There's no way to do it.
Right.
On the other side, one guy
real quick. I like this question. Daryl says, is DJ, if continuity is diminished in importance, is DJ important for locker room vibes? Ooh. It's not that DJ is needed. It's that DJ filled a role that was needed. And so if you lost him, you just have to replace him with somebody that can also handle that role. And like, you can't lose him and not have that role fulfilled, I believe, especially going into next year where I think next year will carry more tension than maybe any season of the last like 4 or 5.
Oh, that's a good point. Boy, that's a good point.
And I think that a guy like DJ is needed for that.
Yeah. If DJ is gone, even if they bring in a replacement option, it probably won't be the same type of guy. And like, they'll miss him. Like they will miss him. It doesn't mean that they can't like, they don't need him to win.
There are better versions of him. He was very good, but there might be one that's actually better.
I'm just talking about the locker room presence person. I'm talking about like fun to be around, great like teammate. That's all I'm talking about. So
right.
On the other side, there is one guy that the Nuggets might be able to get, and Harrison Wind had himself a report on that. We'll talk about that up next here on Locked On Nuggets. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your parts guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us on a Monday, world's finest. Glad to have you guys with us. So Harrison Wind had himself a report about a certain potential free agent. Adam, you want to give us the lowdown?
Gordon Hayward. I don't know the lowdown. I've been out of town for a week, man. I'm out. But Gordon Hayward, he played for the Oklahoma City Thunder, kind of. Played for Charlotte before that. I don't know where you wanted me to take this.
Oh, honestly, I'm just trying to find. I was like pulling up Harrison's.
I see.
Twitter frantically try and find where he put the report at.
It's a completely unsexy signing and well within the lines of what I expect the Nuggets to do this offseason is to add a player like that. The one thing I'll say about it, here's how I'll set the table for you, Matt. Gordon Hayward's a little, hasn't been the same since the injury and has kind of declined a little bit. But I believe that they're playing. He's 34 years old, which is, used to be old. Nowadays, who knows? But it's still pretty old. He might be okay in this system. Like we always think, what do players look like next to Jokic? Well, he can dribble, he can shoot, he has size. Those are 3 things that when guys can do those 3 things, they usually are good next to Jokic. So there is a chance that he could come to Denver and have the best season he's had in the last, 4 or 5 years. But that's a low bar because he was in Charlotte where he was, and then he was in Oklahoma City where he was basically an 8th man.
So there was a kind of one of the things that we glommed onto over at Action Network was if Gordon Hayward is out, you should fade the Hornets. If Gordon Hayward is in, you should bet on the Hornets to cover the spread. And the reason was like, he's just that kind of a player that knows enough about the NBA and knows how to like orchestrate things.
Yeah.
The biggest reason I actually like, it would be very typical for me to be like, this is exactly the type of guy. But I'm not. And the reason is injury availability, I think, is huge. And Gordon's at a point where I just don't know that he can play 50 games. Like it's got to be less than 50 at this point. He just can't stay on the floor.
In theory, though, is that perfect? Like, isn't 50 games? he would almost be a Justin Holiday replacement in a lot of ways. And like one of the problems with Reggie this year was he was an 82 game player when I think he should have been a 50 game player. It's possible that Gordon Hayward's a guy that can't play back-to-backs, and that just naturally gives Julian Strawther the minutes he's going to need.
You're right. I think I'm more just concerned of like, I don't think his injuries will ever be well timed, right? It'll be like,
I mean,
boy, could really use a Gordon Hayward right now, but unfortunately he can't go.
Here's the broader thing. Is he a playoff impact player? I would say no.
Yeah.
I think that he's a guy that gets you through the regular season. And even if that's only 50 games, he really is to me a Justin Holiday replacement or copy.
Now, look, maybe on this team it changes, because I do understand a little bit of why OKC was hard for him, because they were so athletic and so fast and so young.
Yeah.
And so it was very like a lot of their success was because of the coaching side of it. And there's no like, it's very rigid. And Gordon, A, did not have time to kind of get caught up on that. And then B, just like honestly I don't think could play at their pace.
Yeah. And
so he might be a lot more comfortable. Like there's a lot of ways in which I can see Gordon being an overall net positive player for the Nuggets by like a little bit. He is, I will say this, he's a really good playmaker. Like especially as a secondary playmaker, he's very good. He's very good in that secondary, one guy draws attention and the other guy does work. I continue to feel, and I talked about this with Swipa, where I just feel like the second unit is so fundamentally broken that if they don't completely reshape it, I don't think it matters. You don't throw Gordon Hayward in there and all of a sudden the second unit works, right? Like it doesn't fix it. Like the work on the second unit would have to be a major initiative from the front office using the spare parts that they have available to be like, we have to reshape this entire thing. Like we have to create some sort, and I think that it's a worthwhile pursuit, honestly, in large part because of what we talked about, which is I do have a lot of confidence that Nikola can adapt and do these type of things. And I don't think a year where Nikola is not one of the most impactful players in basketball just because the surrounding starting five isn't as good is a terrible outcome if it means that the second unit is not complete trash. Like I think it's an okay if Nikola doesn't have a top 5 BPM, EPM season plus minus on off.
I think he would welcome it, to be honest.
Oh, I know he would.
Yeah.
I have zero concern about like Nikola wants everybody to be good.
I think a bad case scenario next year is Denver's like the 4 seed and Jokic the leader in the MVP straw poll.
Yes.
It's like a nightmare scenario for Denver.
Totally agree. I'm with you 100% on this. Like I do think that like a reshape of the roster around trying to be like, we need to be able to win some of the minutes in where he's not on the floor. If nothing else, just for like, hey, it's worked really well. Let's see if we can get to the 6-minute mark.
Yeah. And I'm even more with, I think playing with Jokic is like a fast track to developing a player. So part of me goes, that's the other part of this is, yes, you can save your good players for non-Jokic minutes, but also means you can bring along your Strathers and your Paytons and play them with Jokic. And it probably is like double minutes. It's like double time. 1 minute with Jokic is worth more than double time. It's worth 5 minutes without him.
So all that said, these are the type of guys that you're going to hear the Nuggets have interest in. Like that's the level of guys that they're going to have to go after. And it's going to be frustrating, I think, for Nuggets fans, because they're going to want, if they're going to lose guys, if they're going to lose KCP, you want an upgrade. If they're going to lose Reggie Jackson, you want an upgrade. It's not that Reggie was great. It's that you don't want to go into the season being like, who's the backup point guard? We hope it's Jalen Pickett, right? Like it might be Jalen. Jalen might kill Summer League, kill training camp, take that job. It might be the story of next season.
Yeah, I hope so.
But you want an option.
You need an option,
right?
But there's also not a lot of options out there. I mean, we were doing this over on DNVR. There's not like a bunch of point guards that you're going to be able to get off the dumpster pile. I mean,
now what I will say on that is I do think there's going to be enough movement. You might be able to sneak into some of these deals and like snag. Hey, they were trying to do this bigger deal, and so they did this other deal with this other team that was just trying to clear cap space, and they were willing to give up a backup point guard, right, to be able to throw a level of guy. Like I think that's doable. I do think a lot of it is like that Zeke contract. Boy, they really could have used Zeke to finish out the year, in terms of raising the contract value. Like
again, I've been going into my same points. I'm gonna avoid them, but I just think there's something to like committing to helping guys succeed and putting them in those positions is going to be so important this year. And Zeke, unfortunately for me, like nobody has confidence in Zeke. That's expired. But I hope we're not saying the same things about Julian Strawther next year.
Yeah.
500 minutes and only 40 of them with Jokic or less. Like if you told me right now, Julian Strawther is going to play 800 minutes and only 100 of them with Jokic, I'll say, oh, he's going to have a terrible year. That's how that's going to go then for sure.
This is a combo for another day. But I do want to ask you at some point, because you're adamant about the development factor of playing next to Nikola. Do you think that playing with Nikola prepares you for playing without Nikola?
100%.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, because for one, it's going to be confidence. You're going to be able to stay on the floor, which is half the battle with some of these guys, right? Like, can I even be on the floor for more than 3 minutes? What really is bad was when a guy goes out there for 3 minutes, is a -8 and has to come out and never play again, which is what happened to players like a Zeke all year, that his whole career, basically. He's a center. So some of this is like inevitable with Zeke, but you can't do that for the other guys. But here's the thing. Like I said, Yoke doesn't have to just play one way. He knows how to, this is what this guy does well. All right, let's work on this is what we do when we're here. And so even a player like Peyton, you get reps at doing the thing you're good at and learning, where do I get to do that? Where are the windows for me to press that? So yeah, I absolutely think it's good for a player's overall development.
Interesting. I think we need to talk more about this. I think we can have a healthy discussion on it through the offseason. We have some time. All right, that's going to do it for Monday's Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us. Make sure to keep it here all week. Swipe it with you on Tuesday. We'll do World's Finest again on Wednesday. I'll probably help you out with a solo show on Thursday, and then we'll do Swipe and Gripe on Friday. Thanks for joining us. Hope you guys have a great week. We'll see you guys again next time on Locked On Nuggets.